25th anniversaries are important occasions, not least in the fast-moving world of aviation. And for the Red Arrows, acknowledged the world's finest formation aerobatic team, 1989 is special. It marks their 25th birthday. And the man who formed the team was then Flight Lieutenant Lee Jones. How did it start, Lee?
Well, Raymond, it started many years before when I joined the Air Force, and in those days jets were taking over from pistons and were much more suitable for formation aerobatics. And I aspired to get onto the Black Arrows, Treble 1 Squadron. This chap, Roger Topp, had formed it, and it really was a fabulous team, and he'd set the standards which we all had to follow. Peter Latham took over from him, and by the time we finished Treble 1 and 92 took over, I determined to form a team for the RAF, which would be a world beater. And this came to fruition in 1964, when we formed the warm-up team. It was a small team from 4 Flying Training School Valley called the Yellowjacks on the Gnat. The Gnat had just been introduced into service, and it was a superb little aeroplane. It looked very fast. It was very fast. Ideal for aerobatics, ideal for formation aerobatics, very sensitive. And so we got this team going. Pilots are never a problem. There's always plenty of pilots, but to get the right sort of ground crew and the right sort of emphasis to their airships to make them agree that this is what we want to do was another story. But we succeeded, and we got the team going. And in 1965, they repainted the yellow aircraft red. They asked me what I'd like to call them, and I said, well, arrows for the Black Arrows, and red because you've painted them red, and I suggested Red Arrows, and this was approved.
Well, you make it all sound very simple, Lee, but come along, you were a flight lieutenant, and you referred to their airships. There must have been a guardian angel in the wings somewhere.
Ah, marvellous chap called Batchy Atchley.
Immortal memory.
Right. Well, Batchy, as you well know, was a great pilot between the wars and during World War II. And he became a director of Folland Aircraft, who were making the Gnat. Whether that had anything to do with it coming into service, I don't know, but into service it came, and it was a very popular and likable aircraft. And he met me one day in, well, it was in the gentleman's room, actually, at the Royal Air Force Station, Hornchurch.
Where better?
And he asked me if I was the chap who'd just come from Treble 1. I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I want you to think about forming a team on this new aircraft that's coming into service. He knew I was very keen on it, you know. Have you flown it? Not yet, sir, no. Well, let me know when you do. Sure enough, he contacted me, and in 1964, I was down in his office, and he said, well, there you are. I've been informed by the then Air Ministry that you're going to lead the team, and pick your pilots and get going.
So when you got the team together, what was your target number? 5, 7, 6, 9?
I wanted 9. I wanted 9, but of course, again, their airships and their financial ships, you know, with the money, they said, oh, we can't possibly do that. We'll make it 5. So it was 5 in 1964 with the Yellowjacks. And then by a bit of fiddling here and there, I got it up to 7 in 1965, the first season. But in fact, we carried a couple of spare pilots on many occasions and flew 9s on 1 or 2 occasions in 1965 as well. So 9 was the ideal because it made a diamond and a nice symmetrical shape, and you could do so many changes with it.
And of course that survives to this day as
yes,
the basic
indeed.
formation.
Well, I think it's rather better. The Italians have always been very good at it, and the French. The Americans have always stayed with a smaller team, very, very good, Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds, but a smaller team. And I don't think it's got the impact of a bigger team, you know, particularly with an airplane like the Gnat and later the Hawk, that you can pull into tight circuits and really keep the show in front of the crowd all the time.
I say, you had the aircraft you want, you had the pilots you want, you had official backing. But then what did you do? Sit down and work out on a piece of paper what you were going to do, or did it evolve in the air?
Well, it evolves to some degree in the air, but we had a basic to start with. You start with looping and rolling in increasing numbers until you get it up to the right amount. You've got to have a good bloke on the ground who zots everything you do, criticizes and criticizes until you got it absolutely right. We had a chap called Dick Storer, who was a marvellous chap, and Dick, with his sort of tongue-in-cheek, would take us apart every time we landed and tell us what we did right and what we did wrong, until we got it absolutely perfect. And you had to have it perfect. No margin for error.
And did you initiate the singleton maneuvers at that time?
Yes, I did, yeah. That was quite interesting because we were looking for something new. We had it's not like international football teams. We had our spies out in Italy and France and America feeding us back with what the opposition were doing, you see, and they were doing some good things. And so we thought, well, we'll do something that nobody's done before. So we did this Russian roulette. In those days, I wasn't allowed to call it Russian roulette, you know, because Gorbachev wasn't about. And so we just called it roulette. And the idea was the two gnats came howling over the runway and split apart and then came and met each other, apparently head-on. Well, the only way to make sure that they didn't hit each other was for me to go and stand out on the runway, and Henry Prince and Bill Loverseed had to come either side of me. Terrifying. But they did very well.
Well, you've mentioned two names, but there were names in that team who became legendary.
Indeed. Well, Ray Hanna, of course, took over from me. He's probably the most legendary of all the chaps because Ray took over. It's always very difficult to take over something because, you know, shall we try something completely new and make a botch of it, or should we? Well, he stuck to the known sequence and then improved on it and polished it up until your claim at the beginning of the program that it was arguably the best team in the world. I think they were by 1967. Unquestionably, and I'm looking at it from a professional point of view.
Yes, but something which has always impressed me about the Red Arrows, right from the very first days, is that you had standards on the ground as well as in the air.
I can take some credit for that because I thought that it was all a publicity thing for the Royal Air Force. So I thought, well, it doesn't just start in the cockpit. And one of our best chaps, whose name probably will never be printed anywhere, was Jock Hudson, our chiefie, our technician. He ran the line with his right fist, you know, and everybody got into shape. We put all our mechanics in snow-white uniforms because we thought, well, that's lovely, that's the way to do it.
But that's very good for their morale, anyway.
The only punishment we ever gave to anybody on the Red Arrows, apart from military discipline, you know, 14-day CC, we threw all that rubbish out. The only one punishment they dreaded was to be posted off the Red Arrows. So, you know, we never had the slightest trouble. Marvellous chaps.
And we can look back to those exciting, formative years thanks to Arthur Gibson's film of 1967. Squadron leader Ray Hanna in the lead.
Red Arrows, taxi. Red, clear to taxi, runway 27, QFE 1013.
Up to 90. Rolling. Go.
benefit. Go. Brake. Brake. Go. Open up and relax.
In his 2 tours with the Red Arrows, Wing Commander Richard Thomas flew both the Gnat and the Hawk. Tell us about the transition stage, Richard.
Well, the main body of the transition was done in October, the beginning of October of 1979. And we all went up to Valley, and it was very much the same team as we had for 1978. This, of course, was planned to try and ease the changeover. And we'd spent about a couple of weeks at Valley converting onto the Hawk. We went back down to Kemble after that, and it was about 4 weeks later that we put our first 9 ship together. But it was only just for the press that we didn't actually do a great deal. It was straight and level and just in diamond. We then went back to sort of basics again, and it was about, I think, about 10 weeks after we first started flying the aircraft, we actually started to do practice displays in the Hawk.
And at that time, Brian Hoskins was the
Brian Hoskins was the leader at that time. He had, in fact, started to convert onto the aircraft a little bit before we had. So after we received the aircraft in October, it was 5.5 months later, we got our clearance from the CNC to go public, and 6 months after we had the aircraft, we did our first display.
Squadron Leader Tim Miller, you have only flown the Hawk. Do you feel like the odd man out in this company?
Oh, very much so, yes. When I joined the team for the first time in '82, and of course the team had been flying the Hawk for several years by then, so I rather missed out on the Gnat, yes.
But it was an extraordinary development. It was an extraordinary change in many ways. If you look at the 2 aeroplanes to the same scale, you can see how very different they are. First of all, was the increase in size to the Hawk a problem, Richard?
The Hawk was a slightly heavier aircraft, and as such it had a little bit more energy. So therefore it took a little bit longer to accelerate if you wanted to accelerate, and just a little bit longer to slow down as well. The Hawk's a very clean aeroplane, and the slowing down was perhaps more problem than speeding up.
But am I right in thinking your basic entry and exit speeds for all the maneuvers were approximately the same?
As far as the main formation was concerned, yes, at about 360 knots. But as far as the solos were concerned, we had to up the speed from 300 knots in the Gnat to 330.
Which was a very considerable increase, of course.
Yes, we were obviously trying to keep the speed as low as we could, because there are all sorts of problems, particularly for solos if you start flying too fast.
Yeah.
Now you go further away from the airfield, you have less time to set the maneuvers up, and it's more difficult. You've got too much G on perhaps as well to keep the display nice and tight. So that was a problem.
You got more height in a loop with the Hawk?
Yes, you did. I can't quite remember with the Gnat in formation, but it was around about 4,000 feet. And as far as the Hawk is concerned, you're looking for something around about 4.7, 4.8.
Tim, points of reference. You can only speak for the Hawk, but it is a handy shape to fly in close formation, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, for what the chaps, when they fly Diamond, they line up, for instance, the CFS badge here on a nav light, which gives them in and out, so to speak, and then the length by lining up the end of the tailplanes here. But we fly several distances away. And in fact, over the years, we were flying a couple of feet closer, perhaps, than when they first got the Hawk into service, because it was more comfortable flying just a few feet closer. But a delightful aeroplane to fly.
What were the points of reference on the Gnat, Richard, or can't you remember?
I think, well, I flew line astern for most of my time in the Red Arrows, actually. But as Lee mentioned, the shape of the Gnat is beautifully designed for Diamond, because it's got a 45-degree sweep, and generally for Diamond you'd be looking down the leading edge. And that made a very nice symmetrical pattern to the Diamond. I mean, you couldn't have had a better shape aircraft for that.
Lee, are you jealous that you didn't get to perform with the Hawk?
Oh, yes, it's another aircraft as far as I'm concerned. I'd like to have had a go at it, but I don't think, you know, no disrespect to the present team, but I don't think it looks as good. You know, I don't think it looks as speedy. I remember some Yank saying to me at the Paris Air Show, you know, he thought we entered our loops at about 500 knots because the Gnat looked as if it was going at 500 when you were doing 300.
Yes.
You know, so
but on the other hand, I think you would both agree as Hawk pilots that the advantages of the Hawk as a piece of practical kit were enormous in terms of range alone, I would have thought.
Oh yes, there are a number of operating advantages that the Hawk has over the Gnat. I mean, range is the obvious one. As far as if you're going to take off from an airfield, fly display and land back, in the Nat days it was about 35 miles. And when you landed back at the airfield you took off from, you had very little fuel. And you probably couldn't divert to another airfield in case of problems. Whereas with a Hawk, I mean, you can fly up to, what, 80 miles, 90 miles probably. 90 miles, and then come back to the airfield you took off from. It's a big difference. And that in itself caused operating problems, because you've got too many options available to you. And on ferry sorties, of course, I mean, the Hawk you can get around 830 miles, and the Nat was 400 or 500 miles, which is a lot less.
So that gave you enormous potential in terms of your annual program.
Yes, it did, but we tried very much to operate in the same way as we'd operated with a Nat, because you obviously want to try and get as close to the display venue as you can, because you don't, first of all, want to transit too far, and the chaps will get tired out by the time they arrive at the display site, and also you've got problems with weather. And you can, if you're going right across the country to do a display, you can get into all sorts of difficulties trying to make your time up and going through bad weather, whereas if you're right next to the site, it's generally no problem.
I'm going to ask you the obvious question, each in turn. In your day, Lee, what was the most demanding maneuver?
The one I designed, Leader's Benefit. Not for me, it was very easy. I got all the others out of my way. And I just did a loop, but the rest of them had to do this incredibly difficult line abreast maneuver, which is most beautiful if it's done properly, yes, but most difficult to do. I
never realized the pun before, Leader's Benefit. Richard, what did you think was the most demanding maneuver?
Well, I probably think back to the days when I was doing solos, and perhaps the opposition loop was the most difficult thing to consistently get looking good.
Yes, I'm interested in your choice of the word consistently. I have heard it said that it must really be very dull being a Red Arrow, because all you do is fly around the sky doing the same things week after week. What would be your reply to that?
Well, I would say it's very true. You do the same things, but no 2 days are the same, and the conditions are different, and it's a problem of trying to achieve this perfection, which you never ever do achieve. You get quite close on occasions, but you never get there, and there's always something to work at.
Do you agree with that, Tim?
Very much so, yes. You know, yesterday, for instance, I flew 4 sorties, training the new guys, and gradually you see improvement as the sorties progress. But no, I would agree with Richard. It does take awful lot of time to get it right.
Yeah, as leaders, I'm sure all 3 of you derive an immense amount of satisfaction from the sheer achievement.
Certainly, it can obviously be very disappointing when you work at it and it doesn't come out right, as obviously it does on occasions. But there is a tremendous amount of enjoyment from not only displaying, but also going from A to B, arriving on time in good order, yep, anywhere around the world. And you're on the ground for 45 minutes and you get airborne and do a display, and you haven't even seen the display site, and that sort of thing is very satisfying.
Tim, what do you regard as the most demanding manoeuvre at this time?
I think probably the Wineglass roll, to fly it very well, because you've got 5 aircraft in line abreast, which is difficult enough to fly. But as the leader, if you don't fly a near perfect roll, you won't give the guys on the outside a chance. So that's the one I really work quite hard at, yes.
Well, now by looking at another piece of film, we can see exactly what all 3 of you mean.
Diamond. Go. Nothing back. Slope car. Go. Pulling up. And rolling. Slope car. Go. Rolling out. Slope car. Go. Big gun. Go. Pulling up. Apollo, go. Vulcan, go. Hang on. Color off, go. Bending there. Now. Concord, go. Vulcan, go. Rolling in. Rolling out. Pulling up. Fade. Go. Pulling up. Smoke car. Go. Wine glass. Go. Coming right. Smoke car. Go. Pulling up.
In its 25 years, the team has in fact compiled a remarkable record of statistics, has it not, Tim?
Yes, I think overall we've displayed in something like 42 different countries. And we've done to date 2,313 public displays and something over 7,000 practice sorties.
But of course, when you say practice sorties, you mean only over base. You don't insist on practicing at the site at which you are going to perform, unlike some other teams.
Yes, it's something we rather pride ourselves in doing. Just pitching up at a site that is not familiar to us, although we will have studied it at great detail on maps and photographs and site surveys, etc., and just go straight in and do a show. And on a busy day, we might do up to 3 shows a day, although normally 2 shows a day. And overall in a year, we aim to do about 120.
And that again puts a very heavy load on the leader, does it not? Because you are the chap who's really got to sort out the local topography.
Well, yes, although you've got an awful lot of people to help you, and the backup is considerable, you've got people to help draw maps, but at the end of the day, yes, you're the chap that has to get the team in good order, exactly on time, over the datum, yes.
And what about the transit flights, Richard? Problems, ever?
There have been a few, yes. So they provide you with more interest almost than doing displays, because you're going into the unknown quite often. And also you're going into all sorts of different airfields, you know, from international airports to very small strips. A lot of variety there.
Well, of course, you, Lee, were experiencing all these leadership problems for the first time, so your load must have been even greater.
Yes, Raymond, that's very true, but I had a good system. I used to delegate the navigation to Hannah, and the technical side to somebody else, and something else to somebody else. In the end, we used to get there.
What a modest chap he is.
Yes, I'm sure he's underplaying it a lot, because we talked about the problems of fuel for the leader in the days of the NAT, but another great difficulty was the radio, because you only had one radio in the NAT, and so every time you changed frequency, you had to check the whole formation in, so you get a long check-in every time you change frequencies.
Yeah.
And the leader had to do all the radios himself, whereas now you've got 2 radios and you've got 2 navigators who do the radio for you, although the leaders, you know, actually were doing the business with the map. And so when you arrive somewhere, you don't talk to anyone as leader, but we all listen out on UHF, and VHF you can talk to the ground on VHF, and it's a very slick system, and it takes an awful lot of load off the leader. I don't know how Lee did it.
Yes.
That makes you feel better about missing out on the net, Tim, does it?
Just a bit, yes. When we actually talk about navigators, we talk of the 2 of the team pilots who just draw the maps up, and they're the blokes who do the radio calls as well to air traffic agencies, while the leader can actually talk to the main formation and call them into certain formations.
Tim, if you had to describe the Arrows in a single word, what would you use?
I think professionalism, in a word.
In a word. Richard?
Well, apart from using the word éclat, which is on the bottom of our crest, which is in a French word, I think means brilliant or shining example, I would use, I think, stimulating, but that's a personal view of how I found the Red Arrows when I was on it.
Lee, as the man who started it, you can have the last word.
Well, you're playing for England, Britain.
Gentlemen, thank you all 3, and here's to the next 25 years.